Hello and welcome back to Divine Dialogue with Dahlia. I am your international, interdimensional oracle, sacred pathfinder, energist, and all around mystical auntie that nobody talks about until somebody is. So I am back with you today with a very, very special guest, somebody near and dear to my heart, Neekisha Rodriguez. Yay!
Thank you. I love that mystical auntie. I love that.
I try, right? Like
Yeah.
I try to swoop in as like the one that's like, okay, here's the crystal, here's the, and then when we progress to herbs and things like that, I send them over to you.
I love
So
it. Yeah.
so Keisha's here uh, to help uh, expand our community, expand our hearts and minds on some very interesting topics, and I wanted to bring this to the channel. Um, She is a bruja and also a bridge builder. This was something that came up in conversation with her. And I think it's such a meaningful aspect to what it means to be in a safe community. A lot of people woke up in 2020, and then many before that, of course. But there's a gap. And our magical friend here, Neekisha, uh, seeks to fill that gap. So I want to get into that with her. Um, and again, brujeria is a fraction of who you are. So,
Yeah.
Keisha, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a bruja, right? But before I became a bruja, I've always been a pretty opinionated and outspoken person about those opinions and always really passionate just in terms of social issues. And uh, and so when I went on my own little personal journey of falling apart and coming undone, which brought me down my spiritual path, which brought me to Brujeria, um, it was sort of a natural merging of, I didn't lose anything from before that part of my journey. I just sort of brought it with me. And Brujeria has sort of allowed me to breathe new life into
Mm.
how I see those things. And so, that's who I am. So I guess I'm a bridge builder, truth teller, and I like to love upon people. So all of those things, mother, daughter, sister. Yeah. So that's me.
Yeah.
That's who I am.
And I have to speak to that love on people piece because as a Virgo, I can be a little like, okay. And my one of my favorite Geminis here is always like, do you need a hug? Are you okay? And she's there with the love. And
Yeah.
when we first met, it was a bit of a learning curve. It was never not well received, but it was
Yeah.
just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And there was always a genuineness to it. So it was like double dutch. Do I take the hug? Do I not? Like, do I
Yeah.
need the hug? So, and the hugs are magical, absolutely.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
with everything that you are, the embodiment of brujeria was not, so we see, I want to segue into this. We see a lot in the media about
Hmm.
people making choices about the paths that they will follow, or witchcraft versus this versus that, right?
Yeah.
But brujeria is a lineage for you. It
Yep.
is very much grounded into your family. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's very common in a lot of, I think, Latin culture generally, right? Like, so that there's sort of like this double um, world that exists where spirituality and religion don't necessarily negate each other, right?
Mm,
So
right.
growing up, I did have, Catholic aunts. My mom was Catholic, basically all the adults around us were Catholic, right? So I got to see them like praying the rosary and going to church, and I would go to church with them on Sunday, but also they would also do like these spiritual baths on us, or they would hang these herbs here. And I didn't understand it as brujeria then, right? It was just
Right.
like superstition or this is just what we do, right? And as I got a little older, when I became a teenager, it was sort of more visible in our world for different reasons. You know, I was sort of going through things, and so my aunts or my mom's friends from work who were practicing like Santeria or Brujeria, you know, they would give her like these little herbs, these little packets of things, or again with the spiritual baths, that type of thing. And again, I didn't really understand it as anything different or separate from the Catholic religion that I grew up in. Um, but I got reacquainted with it, you know, once I, you know, went into my own spiritual awakening. And it was actually pretty cool because it was, I was learning it with a new sort of set of eyes, but
Okay.
it also felt very familiar. So,
Right. So you had started bridge building long before
yeah,
actually bringing other people into the practice. I mean,
yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah,
And I imagine that reconnecting with that aspect of yourself probably brought more like fullness or wholeness to spiritual
absolutely.
practices. Yeah,
Absolutely. It felt like I was coming home to myself, if that makes any sense.
absolutely. It
Yeah,
does. It does.
yeah.
Especially, so you and I share that sort of Hispanic background with my family being from Costa Rica, and yours is from,
Puerto Rico.
yep.
Yep.
So there is that little hush hush of like, okay, so these are the things that we do, but we don't do them in church and we don't talk about them.
Right. And we don't talk about, yep. We don't talk about them.
I
Yep.
mean, grandmother, just like a quick little story. I've had several conversations with her where she's let in just a little bit more of the magic. So practices coming from Jamaica and finding out that from Jamaica and that we emigrated it to Costa Rica and all of that. And then finding out that my great aunt was a Reiki master for like 20 years. I mean, I'm like,
That's
guys,
amazing.
and then
Right.
empaths. You know, my grandmother was born at 7:30. My mother was like, we all have the same left hand, and these are all things that have led to this sort of passing down of the abilities, right?
Right.
But nobody talks about it. So I got, again, to be the mystical auntie that was just like, okay, you know what?
Isn't,
Crystals, classes,
yep.
mentors.
Isn't
and,
that
and and
something?
I imagine it's been the same for you, right?
It has. It's interesting because once I had a conversation with my father, I'm like, listen, this is me right now. This is just it. I wasn't expecting any pushback from him, but he was like, you know what? On your, you know, your grandmother's side, there's this, that, and that, and we used to practice this, and then your grandfather used to have these visions, and you know, and it was like, well, that's interesting because this is my first time hearing about it, right? And you know, recently, I think it was last year when I went to Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to Puerto Rico numerous times throughout my life, but it was a very different trip, right? Because, well, for one, I don't go very often. You know, I go once in a handful of years. So going this time around as being out of the broom closet, I call it, you know, living my life openly as a bruja, and my aunts all know this, it was a totally different connection that I got
Mm.
to have with them. It was more intimate, it was more honest, you know, and we were like sitting down and talking very openly about our brujeria. And you know, it was interesting because sitting in their house, now I could point out, you know, the things that they had in there that I know, oh, that's brujeria right there, you know,
Right.
and it was really cool and it's really awesome. But a really cool part of doing this is my daughter, Chloe. Like she's really, you know, she's watching it all unfold and she's like, oh, that's so cool. And she's looking at all my like witchy books and my herbs. She's
Right.
like, I want those. When, you know,
Oh,
when you're too old, mom, give them to me. So it's pretty cool.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, her generation is embracing this in ways that I don't think anybody has ever really
Yeah.
seen. I mean, everything from identity to, you know, uh, personal journeys to celebrating each other. It's all beautiful to watch.
It
And then
is.
to
It
have
is.
a parent who, you know, is taking to nurture yourself and be the example, right? Like it's one thing to say, okay, I know you're into these things. I'm going to give you a book, Crystal, and
Yeah.
all of those things are very supportive.
Yeah.
And then it's entirely another to embody what it means to move through the challenges magically or,
Yeah.
you know, mystically or esoterically or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what a beautiful gift for her.
I hope that I mean, I hope that her interest in it continues to grow and she passes it down to her kids. And yeah, so it
Well,
is a beautiful thing.
those seeds are always planted, just like you were saying, you know, with what happened for you.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So bridge building. That's
Yep.
why we're here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
in our metaphysical communities, and I hate to realize too much, but there can be like a pattern of behavior that takes place
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
there's sort of gatekeeping. There's this
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, you need to know this. Did you burn today? Did you, you know, there are all these rules that have come forward from, um, we'll just say different places. I don't want to place any judgments on it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when against these things, especially I think if you're like a newbie mystical person or getting into
Yeah.
energy, you're trying to find your way. Like a lot of people are coming out of religion and going, okay, I don't want
Yeah.
God to hate me, but I need something.
More.
And so when I met you and we started talking and having these conversations about you being a bridge builder, it was eye opening. And again, I felt like something so necessary for community. So I want to ask you after gathering on, what does bridge building mean to you?
So for me, bridge building is really about taking the intimidation out of approaching um, people exploring their own divinity and different spirituality. Because you know, the backtracking a little bit, the gatekeeping and that behavior that you were talking about, it's very similar to what you experience in religion. You know, like,
Absolutely.
and so and I feel like it's very easy, especially now. And I hate to say that spirituality is trendy now, but it's trendy
It
now.
is.
And yeah, and I think that in of itself sort of gives people a wrong impression about it, right? So it's like it.
Sure.
So on one hand, you have people that are intimidated or that feel like they have to, just like in religion, like you have to be at a certain level to be acceptable, to be
Mm,
spiritual, to do this, to do that, right? Like you have to meditate, you have to have 20 million crystals, you have to have your chakras balanced and do all this or that, or else or you have to burn sage, or you know what I
yeah,
mean? You have to do all
absolutely.
of these performative things that don't really mean anything in terms of your own spiritual walk, right? So it's the same thing that you get in religion. So you have people that are intimidated in that aspect. And then on the other side of that coin, you have people that think, oh, all I got to do is go get a pack of tarot cards, go get a starter set of crystals, and start,
From Barnes and Noble.
right. And that's it. I'm spiritual and I'm good to go. So when I think about bridge building, it's really just about helping people understand like we all have a divine connection, right? Like we don't
Absolutely.
have to look outside of ourselves. We can look inside of ourselves. We are essentially our home, our altar. We're it. We don't need all of this, bullshit, so to speak. That's just what I'm going to call it. We don't need all of
Yeah.
this. And I love my tools. I mean, obviously, as a bruja, I use a lot of them. But so when I think about bridge building, it's about, sort of getting people to understand that you are a spiritual and divine being exactly as you are right now. That's
Right.
all there is to it. And that's where it starts. And really, that's all you need to get started on this journey. And also, and now I'm not a religious person, but what I have learned on this journey is that some people still need the religious aspect to hold on to, sort of as a guardrail. And there's nothing wrong with that as they're
Right.
taking this other journey, right? And so it's also to help people understand you're not negating, that exploration of your relationship with God by doing this. So
Exactly. There's even some overlap, right?
yes, there's a lot of
The
overlap.
the
Yeah.
the prayers versus the spells or the invocations, like
Yes,
all of these things, what's their foundation, right? It's to call in
absolutely.
something, call in assistance, call in energy,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
So, okay, so now that we have this bridge, we have, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We
Yeah.
have, you know, you may be segueing from one thing to another, and you can hold space for both. You can stand on the middle of the bridge. You could be at the other side of the bridge helping people over. And I think that's sort of more your realm, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So so, in all of that, are there three things that you might have considered being particularly passionate about when it comes to the conscious community alongside your bridge building?
Yes. And I would say everything sort of that I do or I talk about under the bridge building umbrella sort of falls under these three categories. So, first and foremost, I'm really passionate about decolonizing. As a collective, I think we have to decolonize our views on spirituality and religion,
Mm,
specifically as it relates to our own divinity. Again, that's all about knocking down this idea that God exists outside of ourselves or that our divine connection is outside of ourselves. So I think it's really important that we decolonize some of those beliefs because a lot of us, and specifically Black and Brown people, but everyone
right,
falls victim to this, but a lot of us have sort of just, we roll with the religion that we were born into, right? And we
with
don't
without
question
asking
things
questions.
and we
Yeah,
don't ask questions, right? And a lot of cases, asking questions is looked down upon. You know what I mean? That's a bad thing. So I think that's why it's important to have those conversations. Like, let's explore where those ideas came from, who
right.
benefited from us, buying into that. So I think that's a really important thing. And secondly, it's really important that all of us understand our interconnectedness, not just with each other, but with the world around us, with the universe, with the stars, with the cosmos. Like it's all related, right? Like there is no
Right.
separation is a myth. That's my personal belief, right? We can certainly create space between ourselves and other people and the thing, but that's why the world is in chaos because we're all moving in sort of, we think we're separate from one another, but we're not. Um,
Right.
and so that's a big piece of it. And third, and it goes into that whole, what you were talking about, prayer versus ritual. Really getting people to understand that magic, and I'm putting that in air quotes, is not as woo woo or out there as people think it is. It's actually really practical and it might go by a different name, but if you go back and you like listen to stories from like your grandmothers or your aunts, or even in just looking at cultural books at how different societies did things, even modern day The Secret, the law of attraction, right? Like all
Right.
of that stuff, it all follows a very basic universal principle that you find in magic. And so it's not really as crazy um, sounding as I think a lot of people think. They
Mhm.
hear someone say magic and they conjure up, I don't know, the most
The
theatrical
the
interpretation of it.
cauldron,
Yeah,
the sparks.
bubble, toil, and trouble, and all of that, and Harry Potter and all that. But it's really a lot more practical than that. So Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So sort of falls under that sort of decolonization piece too,
Yeah.
right? Like when you said decolonizing these practices and beliefs, it made me think about how historically colonized been, if you cannot have a society or a culture submit to you, you infiltrate that culture with um, by having, you know, your God dominate theirs or rewriting the histories and things like that.
Exactly.
Um, and when you have, I guess the way that's bled into current society is that people are still trying to dominate one another with some of these magical practices. Like,
Yep.
you know, you go to a reader, any reader nowadays, and they're like, well, your chakras are off balance. And, but they didn't tell you about anything else. Like,
Yep.
they just said your chakras are messed up. They didn't talk about the marriage that's crushing your soul or, you know, the five.
Yep.
Um, it's it's this instance of, well, if you balance your chakras, if you do this, if you do that, then life falls in order, instead of, and that's maybe a colonized way of thinking. Like
It is.
if you only follow this practice and religion,
Yep.
then life goes swimmingly accordingly. At
Yep.
least as far as, again, we can't generalize. There are some religious organizations out there that are probably doing more than most to open up to new ideas,
Yeah.
but the predominant theme is fire and
Hmm.
brimstone.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. And going back to what you were saying about even on the spiritual side of things, it kind of reminds me of that. Have you ever seen that meme where it's like a bunch of men dressed in Spider-Man suits and they're all
Oh, and
pointing
they're
at each other?
yes.
So religion and spirituality, sometimes it gives off that vibe, like, you know, they're pointing at each other about what's wrong, but it's like really they're employing the same divisive thinking and the same
Yeah.
divisive tactics, right? So um because you're absolutely right, and I think that's a big part of bridge building too, is there's this thinking that if you are a spiritual person, you have to walk a certain way, talk a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
look a certain way, and you have to like do things a very certain way. Like you have to visibly give off, I'm a yogi, I'm a guru, you know what I mean? Or people sort of dismiss that, right? And it is throwing the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of ways, right? But it sort of dismisses that you can take and you have to take a holistic approach to life. And with by holistic, I don't mean in the like the wellness, you know, meaning
Right.
of that term. I mean like you are a human being, but you are also a spiritual being. You know what I mean? And we have to balance that out. You can't live all in one space
No, you can't.
or the other. You know what I mean? Like you can't spend your day up here, you know,
Let me tell
communing
you, it
with
doesn't
spirit.
work.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. So, and that's a big part of bridge building for me too, is getting people to understand like you don't have to be this, you know, wrapped up in a virtuous spiritual bow all the time. So,
Well, and what I love about your work, it opens the eyes of people in a way that I know when I first started, I wish I had had, because to your point, I was seeing things like um, different spiritual people operate different thing. I was like, all
mhm,
right, fall in line, let me do it. I mean, you know,
yeah,
one of my first mentors was very big on like fasting and doing all these things to prepare for a session, and they were beautiful practices and rituals, and
yeah,
I understood there was this anchoring in of energy that she was trying to do, and that worked for her, but
mhm,
I never asked it worked for me until I started like fasting and having issues, and then I was like, wait, aren't I supposed to be a divine? Is something wrong with me? And it was
yeah,
like, no, your body is literally just saying don't,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
find a different way. You have different channels, and I believe when I have witnessed you working with people, or you know, seeing you building that bridge in different circles, you give people a space to walk their path, be themselves, and to have that very necessary part of seeing what works for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I think that's really important, because I remember when I was first starting to get more into brujeria with doing the rituals and things like that. There was like a nanosecond where I got so caught up in, no, the ritual has to be done this way, and I have to do it, and I have to, everything has to be done perfectly. And then I realized, no, like the most important part of the ritual, number one, is me and the intention that I'm bringing to it. And there are so many, you have to do what feels right to you and what you're intuitively guided to do. And like you said, fasting isn't for everybody. There are just certain things that just don't work for everybody. It's about what resonates with you, because we all came here with different sets of gifts, different sensitivities. Our antennas are all different. So we don't all require the same maintenance or the same expression of that energy. You know what I mean? So I because I don't want to seem like I'm just jumping on the muggles, because it's an issue within the spiritual community too. There's a lot of, you can talk to a lot of witches. It'll be like, no, you have to do things this way. Or, you have to have a black candle. You have to have yes, those things are important. But they also, they have the power that you give them, if that makes any sense.
It makes absolute sense. And considering there were times when, your local curanderos were the ones that were in my family. So like when we didn't have medicine people in the villages, they would go to the curandero, or your local bruja to remove curses, hexes, or, whatever you needed. If they didn't have a black candle, they still did their work.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the magic or the energetic instance was stronger, because, it's one thing. Let's acknowledge, that if you do a spell and that has to do with love on a Friday, like there's energy for that, because it's Venus's energy and all of that. So I think there's space, conversation about what enhances magical practices versus what empowers, like what gives power to magic.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a part of why I love working with astrology so much, because I'm really big on taking advantage of the energy that's at play. And sometimes also it just helps to know, okay, I'm not being completely crazy. Mercury's in retrograde. Right? So
right now, if you're watching this replay and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah,
it's happening right now.
That's right. It's happening right now. So, the energy, you're absolutely right. You should be aware of the energies you're working with and everything. But ultimately, what feels right to you is the road you should really go down. And it's also a really good practice in developing your intuition too. It's just another way to sharpen that sword.
And to ask, what am I capable of, right? I mean, we're supposed to evolve. And I think that's another part of I'm not trying to tell you, but I see it when you do it. That bridge building process is it's so layered and leveled, right? Like you get the first, and then they're good for a period of time. And then there's this new evolutionary development that happens, and they're like, boom, at another bridge. And so, what worked 3 months ago may not, at present day. And I think that, this is where the tools can be helpful, but also, like you said, that intuitive piece. What do I need now versus, I see a lot of people come into my practice and they're like, my gifts have stopped and I'm blocked. And I'm like, maybe right? Like, I don't want to tell you you're wrong, but let's try this. Let's try looking
Right.
at it differently. Like, maybe you've been
Yeah.
a feeler all these months, and now your spiritual antennas, as Keisha
Yeah.
put it, are to a place where now you're a seer and your
Yep.
dreams have been off the chain, but you've been writing them off because you don't feel
Yeah.
anything, you
That
know?
is exactly right. Yep. That's exactly right. Because we do change on this journey, like, and you do have to change with it. That's a part of that's one of the unexpected things. I think I wasn't prepared for all of the, well, I guess I got to change my mind about how I feel about this now.
Girl, same.
Okay. Because I was ready to die on this hill 6 months ago, but now I guess I have to change how I feel about about things. So yeah.
Spirit said, okay.
Yep. That's exactly it. Spirit's always saying something.
I thought this is how it was. No, no, no,
Yeah.
we changed.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
We
that's
don't
what it was
live in your
6 months
silly
ago.
fixed world.
Exactly. Yeah.
What's so funny, I think, just to bring astrology into this, is that we're both mutable as zodiac signs, but we love our like, where's my box?
Yes. Yeah. Because I am fine fitting into it. And then sometimes it's like spirit is like kicking the box over so you can fall
Right.
out of it. It's like, no, I was fine right here where I was. Thank you very
Right.
much.
As we try to push the box back up. Come on. And spirit, your guides, your angels, your orishas, your people, your councils, they're all like, oh, look how cute. Okay,
Yeah.
when's she gonna stop and do the
She's
real work?
holding on. She's holding on for dear life. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Magical things.
Yep.
Now, one thing in all of this, right? So there's the decolonization piece, there's the evolutionary piece, there's so much to be a bridge builder.
Mm-hmm.
And again, until I found you, there may have been people operating under those auspices of bridge building, but it
Yeah.
wasn't their pursuit. It was
Mm-hmm.
just sort of a side result of their work, right? So now I've met you. This is your work. Like, this is,
Yeah.
you're the
Yeah.
CEO.
Yes.
Rose Apothecary, by the way, fantastic products.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not BS. We just wouldn't talk about it if it didn't work, but they work.
They do.
It
They
works.
really do. They really do.
How do you, as a bridge builder, create that you mentioned earlier, accessibility to these things? So, like, what
Mm-hmm.
does accessibility, when you approach the public, what does that look
Mm-hmm.
like?
It being unapologetically me. So,
Okay.
and what I mean by that is I'm literally using my life, and that's why I use so many of my own stories, and I tell, I that's why I talk from that perspective, because I want people to understand, like, especially people that have known me for years and they know my story, right? I just want people to understand, listen, I curse, you know, I talk, I get angry, like I'm just a regular everyday person, but I'm also not, I'm also going to talk to you about, whatever's on my heart that I feel the divine has given me to share with you, right? I also want to talk to you about how we're all divine beings and, like, let's go be divine badasses and let's get our shit aligned and together. Sorry, I just have to. So that's how I do it. You know what I mean? Like, again, it goes back to the whole, I just want people to understand you don't have to be some virtuous, person. Like, you don't see me posting pictures of, like, I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not, but
Right.
I'm still talking honestly from the bottom of my heart. Right. And, I still talk mostly everything I somehow bring back to spirituality, because to me, everything is spiritual,
Right. It's a
everything.
lifestyle.
That's what it is. Right.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so that's how I do it, because I don't know how else not to do it. You know what I mean? I don't ever want it to be a performance thing. I don't want it to come off performative to
Right.
people. And so if I don't feel it like here in my heart, I won't talk about it. If I feel like I really can't, if somebody were to say, well, Keisha, I want to hear more about that. And if I feel like I don't have any more to give on that, then I won't say anything about it at all in terms of like spirituality and just exploring other ways, I guess, to find your inner voice. Because really, what it comes down to is helping people feel more empowered, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and finding their voice, because that's a big part of it for me. And because to me, everything is spiritual and it is all connected, I feel like people that understand their own divinity and the power of their own voice, they're not going to sit around and watch a bunch of social injustice go down. You know what I mean? They're going to understand the importance of everybody having their rights, and they're going to understand the importance of why you, as a straight white male, should worry about what's happening to this woman's body and how the government's trying to control it over here. Right. But you
Absolutely.
don't you don't you don't get to that point if you don't understand I'm a divine being, and everybody here on this fucking planet with me is divine too, and we're all in this shit together. So we got to get it together. That's it.
Right. And it
Yeah.
was such an interesting divide within the spiritual community when COVID happened,
Yeah.
because there were so many things that came forward, came to light. And without getting on one hill or the other, you saw was this disinterest and disconnect
Mm.
between magical people and the rights of others. And it was so strange. It was like oh gosh, I can't even think of the word. It was this cognitive dissonance,
That's
because
exactly it.
for
Yeah.
centuries, magical practices, spirituality, all of that has been for the disenfranchised,
Yeah.
because we didn't have access to
Exactly.
the finances and the things that
Yes.
actually made a difference in the world.
Yep.
So we reached for what we could, and we created these practices
Yep.
and these things out of that. And then what you saw was it was slowly being snatched and pulled away in
Yep.
favor of this, like, la 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 la, I don't hear it,
Yeah.
la la la. And there, I could remember being in communities and hearing people talk about ascension and saying you can ascend if you're bogged down in these things and you're worried about these things. And in my heart, I don't even want to say my mind, in my heart, I felt like we can't ascend without that stuff,
Yes.
because
Yes.
at this point you cannot leave your body behind.
You can't.
Yes, one day the aliens may come, and yes, we'll go up in the ship, but you know what you're taking with you?
Yep.
This
Your
thing.
body. Yes. And it goes back to what I was saying about, like, you can't be all in the spiritual world and forget that you're here on this very real plane, earthly plane, in this
Yeah,
body. It doesn't work that way. Like,
no.
we're here to figure out how we balance it all. At
And
least that's, yeah.
the presentation from was almost like, oh well, that's holding us back. And it's like, it's holding us back. Being made uncomfortable by it is holding us back.
Yeah.
Like, how are you supposed to channel, be a connection for the divine, and you can't deal with suffering? Like, there, to me, that kind of spirituality does have a cap. It's
It
not, and
does.
I'm not even going in to say that, you know, this person is wrong and that person's wrong. But if you are going to preach expansion and ascension, it has to be oneness. It has to be a conversation of oneness. When my head
Absolutely.
hurts, my body, the rest of my body knows it goes nowhere. If my foot
Absolutely.
hurts, I'm limping. We're all a part of one body, you
And that's
know?
how it works. That's how it works. And that's a part of that interconnectedness piece too, that I think is important for people. But I also think once you go down the path of really sort of discovering, hey, I'm a divine being and I'm already who I am right now. I think sort of that realization, oh, everything really is connected. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I'm connected to this person and we're connected to the environment and the world that we live in. Um, I think that sort of awakening is inevitable, which is why I think everything is spiritual. Again, it goes back
it
to that, everything really is spiritual. So
it makes mundane conversations really weird. Like as somebody comes up to you and is like, "Man, oh, I've just my it's just been getting on my nerves, and all of a sudden I developed this pain in my neck, and I just thought," and you want to be like,
mhm.
they are being a pain in your neck, and that
Yep.
is why it is manifesting. And if you dealt with that, the pain might subside. And they're like, you know what? I'm
Like
gonna
I
take
don't
my
think that's what it
Tylenol.
is.
I
Right.
know.
That's
Or you
not
just
what it
don't say
is.
anything. Like, it's not the right
Yep.
place and time, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because empath things, sometimes you're standing in the line at the store, and to have the conversation, there's just not enough time and space for it, and you
There's not.
trust that the divine will send somebody else to to guide them down. But it makes mundane conversations really
It
weird,
does.
because you
It
start
does.
asking, you're like, you've seen that, I mean, I'm sure it's like TikTok, all these things where they're like, you see me, and they'd be like, yeah,
Yep.
does she see us? And like that unfold for the person, and they're just like, no, life is just hard sometimes, and you're like, there's
Nah.
magic
Yep.
and energy.
And that's a part of magic is a lot more practical than people want to give it, credit for, right? Energy, magic, whatever you call it, it's real and it's there and it's always at work. Yeah.
Right. Put the bay leaf in your shoe, see what happens.
Just do it.
Rub,
What do you
rub
have
the
to lose?
salve.
What do you have to lose? Just do
Oh
it.
no, it took my shoe off. They saw there was a leaf in it. Now there's questions. Who cares?
But right. But well, it's funny because when I years ago, I was sort of in denial, right? So I would call my crystals meditation stones, right?
We all do it. We all do it.
and and I would tell, my friends would be like, "Hey, where'd you get your crystals from?" And I'd be like, "All right, so I got it from the shop, but don't be intimidated or scared when you walk in there and blah blah blah." I felt like the need to explain away all these things, and I was so scared if somebody saw me like, I don't know, with my bottle of Florida water or something, right? Now it's just like I'm out and proud and yeah.
In the middle of Walmart. No,
Listen, wherever I
energy in
need
here is
it,
funky.
wherever I need it. Yeah, and that is and just living in that truth is also a part of the bridge building, right? It's like helping people
Absolutely.
understand there's no shame in it. There's nothing, it's not as scary as people would think.
You know what it reminds me of? When we hit puberty and we have to buy tampons for the first time. And it's like you're try to cover the box with magazines.
Yep.
Didn't have
Yes.
self-checkout back in the day. So it'd be like, all right, I'm
Yep.
gonna go buy like 6 things. And you'd be
Yes.
trying to get the cashier to do that one first so that
Yeah.
nobody saw what else you were doing.
And pray that they weren't gonna price check it because it's
Right.
like just
But
hurry up and get it in the bag. Yeah.
or condoms. Yep, all of them.
Same
All of the
thing.
things.
Same thing. Yep. Yep.
Um so all of this aside, right? Like it can be funny, right? It
Yeah.
can be serious. It can be like there's full spectrum of what it means to have a magical lifestyle. And then for you, you're showing us bring what's possible so that you can maybe even walk back and forth across that bridge. Like that wasn't even something I considered until just now. Sometimes you do have to step back into the muggle world. I know a
Mm-hmm.
very prominent witch who was like the head nurse at somewhere else. One of the people that got me into crystals was writing speeches for a congressperson. I mean, there is no line, right? So you can dial back and forth. And when I say got me into crystals, she was like, connecting to my higher self, speaking to the crystal and going, okay, yes, you too. And actually put my first crystal in my hands. And then
That's
during the week, it's like speeches. And I was
right.
like, how
Like
do
just a
you,
completely,
why would you do that boring thing when you have
yeah,
all of this? You know?
right. But
So,
it's all connected. Like they made it, you know what I mean? It just is. It just was.
and
Yeah,
probably made that like whole situation better, like adding in
absolutely.
subtle magical elements,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? So, one of the things that I would like to know about you, we've been friends for a while,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I actually know this about you, but is there
Yeah.
anything that you would want to share that you've gone through inwardly with this bridge building process
Hmm.
that you feel like you've been able to overcome or feel comfortable sharing that you're still working through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, and you know some of this because I've shared with it. Actually, I had my like first, I think, epiphany doing a meditation at your shop,
Oh,
on this. But making the ancestral connection was really important for me because I wanted
mm,
my work, my brujeria, to be rooted in something that resonated with me, right? And again, not to say that there's one way that's better to do it than another. I just wanted what was going to resonate with me and what was going to feel right for me, right? And this is actually a pretty common thing, especially amongst Black and Brown folks, because we're colonized people. That's just what it is, right? And so we can only go back in some cases so far to get in touch with our ancestral roots, right?
oh, that's true.
Um, that's and sometimes that can be really that's a really like another intimidating aspect of it, right? Because people get discouraged in that, right? Because they're like,
Yes.
how do I verify, that this is my lineage? Who do I have to ask for, stories or, you know what I mean? So that can be a really daunting part of the process. And so, that was a challenge for me because, growing up, and it's another common thing amongst Latinos is, we're a very heavily colonized people, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so, and I try and explain to people in some cases, culturally, we're more behind with, the colorism and the whole social class than even America is. And that's pretty hard for some people to understand, but in a lot of cases that's the truth, right?
Hmm.
So, um, even in having, a lot of aunts that practice brujeria, folk medicine, whatever, they felt comfortable calling it, right? Um, I had some pushback, with, well, why is it so important that you learn so much about the Tainos? Why is it so
Mm,
important that, you connect with that? Like, you're Puerto Rican, like that should be good enough, or,
yeah.
and that's a whole nother like conversation. So I'm gonna try not to go too far down that path. But so that was a challenge. That was a big challenge. But again, I kept getting confirmation from spirit along the way that I was going down the right path, that I was doing the
Right.
right thing. And in finding that knowledge, I felt more at home. And it sort
Okay.
of confirmed, practices that I was already naturally gravitating to. And that's the thing
Right.
too. I think once you're when you're doing any kind of work, whether it's energetically or metaphysical, whatever, I think you really got to pay attention to what you're naturally, what gets your heart going. Because
Okay.
when you keep digging, you find, oh, there's something there. Like you were a Reiki master before you found out that you had other Reiki practitioners in your family, right? So like
Absolutely.
you were already gravitating towards it, but there was also already a very real sort of history in it in your family, right?
Yeah.
So I just learned to keep to keep trust my intuition, number one with that, but also not just trust my intuition, but also listen to the guidance that I was asking the universe and spirit for in that respect. But that was pretty hard. And in some ways, that's still something that I'm working through,
Mm.
right? Um, yeah. But I would say that's probably the most recent challenge that I've had, especially as it relates to bridge building, right? Because I think as a healer, or when you're doing anything in a spiritual capacity, I think some certain people look at you to have all the answers, right?
Right. Yes.
And the truth is sometimes we don't. Sometimes the healer needs healing too. So this
Absolutely.
journey, this journey of sort of connecting, trying to connect with my ancestral roots so I can inform more of my brujeria with it, has been a challenge, but it's something that, and I'm still working through, but it's been so rewarding to keep pushing through.
I think that continuation work really speaks to your integrity. Something that I don't think is commonly talked about is that continuation of questioning, you know, what is this grounded in? What is this rooted in? What are my intentions? How am I moving through this process? And you're actively doing that. I think it's important to talk about that. Like, a lot of people do throw it under the label of like imposter syndrome, but some of it's just natural. Like, if you're a good person, you want to make sure that you're continuing to do good things, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to make sure that I was, giving proper reverence, and making the right offerings to my ancestors as well too. I
right,
think that's another intimidating piece. It's like people, you hear a lot when you're on this journey. It's again because it's trendy. People are like, "Oh, you have to like, commune with your ancestors," but a lot of people don't know who their ancestors are, or they
right.
don't
Or
know
even
how to
what really communing means.
exactly, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say through my challenge is keep pushing through it. Like if anybody who's listening to this, keep pushing through it. Just trust your intuition. Like you will get the confirmation you need. It will come somehow, some way. Because one thing about the universe is like once you tap in to that language, you're always going to get the guidance. It's always
Yeah,
coming. Always. And it's funny because that's another part of this bridge building piece. I tell a lot of my friends, like, you don't really need me. You don't need me. You just need to turn on the light switch for yourself, because once you turn it on, you're not going to be able to turn it off. Like you
right,
will see all the guidance and messages. They're always coming. They're everywhere. Yeah.
right, right. And it continues to evolve. Like, if you started out receiving messages, words outside. Shout out to the eagle that flew over my car today. I was like, ah, but predominantly, my messages come through my first intuitive. Well, it like my first inclination, I'll say, is to say,
Yeah.
I don't fucking know. And
Yeah.
then spirit will be like, bloop. And I'm like, oh, well, actually, here it is.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then, it resonates or it doesn't, and we all move forward. So,
Yeah.
yes, sometimes it will be, the bird outside or the leaf in the wind, or, you're like, I don't know why I'm really drawn to that crystal today. And you go and reach for it. But like
Yeah.
Nisha was saying from the very beginning, you are your most important tool. You are the only tool you need,
Yep.
and the rest is enhancement. And those enhancements, I'd
Absolutely.
like to do a little plug here. Those enhancements sometimes do come through her shop.
Yes,
So
thank you.
with the bridge building process, you have found a connection with herbs,
Hmm.
and even went
Hmm.
as far as to get some herbology certifications, right?
I did. Yep. Yep. I
So
absolutely did.
could you describe your relationship with the plant kingdom? Like, what does that look like?
Very spiritual, and which it draws back to what I was just saying about trying to ground my work in my ancestral sort of rituals and practices, once I started learning more about the Tainos connection with, the plants and the animals around them, it was like, oh my God, it makes sense. Like that's what I believe now, or that's how I've always felt, right? So um it's just very spiritual. And so how I got into it, why they became such a big deal. And it's interesting because all of my aunts and my mother have always been huge gardeners my entire life, right?
Oh, interesting.
And I've always made fun of them for it because I thought, you guys are insane. You're spending an obscene amount of money on dirt and plants. And what are you doing? Like, I used to make so much fun of them. I used to make so much fun of my mother. And then um, as I wanted to perfect my craft in brujeria, right, it became sort of, herbs were just sort of a natural sort of thing to explore, right? Because if I wanted to do protection, well, there's a certain plant that I could put in my front door or in my backyard or wherever that would help increase that, right? If I wanted to do a prosperity spell, there's plenty of herbs that I had right in my, spice cabinet that I could employ to do that with. So I don't know. It's just somehow something in that. It just sort of lit this fire for me, because something about working with the herbs and working with them with the intention, to bring about whatever it is, whatever energy it is I'm trying to usher in, whether it's protection, change, whatever the energy is that I'm trying to tap into. It's amazing to me that, the creator gave us everything that we needed for, like right here. You know what I mean? It's a lot like with the crystals, right? I feel the same way I feel about the crystals, I feel about plants. It's like they were given to us by the divine with a very specific energetic imprint. And they can help us. So why wouldn't we use these tools, right? And another amazing thing about plants is it's a lot of the magical correspondences that they have are spiritual, sort of coincide with what their physical, whatever physical ailment that they can fix for you. It sort of it coincides, which I also think is pretty amazing and it's pretty neat. Plants are just amazing. So,
right.
So
in their own little world.
Yeah, they literally are their own little world. And it's really amazing. It goes back to decolonization and your mindset too, because once I started learning about all these plants, now when I drive down the road, I'm like, that plant right there that's growing on the side of the road can cure this, and that. Or this plant right here that's growing on the side of the road is actually edible, and people can harvest it and they can eat from it. And then I started learning about how a lot of cities don't allow the residents to grow certain vegetables or certain gardens within certain limits. It's all very interesting because it goes into exactly what you were saying earlier about like these magical practices and things like that being the practice of the disenfranchised, right? Because that's what we had to rely on. And getting into herbalism, it's sort of a really good reminder of that, right? So we've stepped away, and I am, and by no means, I support big, the big hospitals, pharma, all of that, not necessarily the consumerism that goes behind them. But I do support people seeking healing however it comes, right? So I believe in medicine, I believe in doctors and things like that. But what I'm saying is that was a very intentional step away that we took from medicine that we could literally go in our backyard and pick to, fix our own ailments, spiritual and physical, to this thinking that we have to go to a church to get the spiritual medicine we need. We have to go to a hospital to get the medicine we need. We have to go to a doctor to get the medicine we need. So it's all connected. It's all connected. And stepping into herbalism has really sort of closed that loop for me and see how it's all connected.
And there is so much to be said for science that's coming out that talks about our emotional, spiritual connection to disease. So, um, plants, many that you probably work with or have learned about, can ease that psychosomatic process, our stress, helping us become calm, only to alleviate, a chronic condition that someone may not have been empowered enough or encouraged enough to explore within their body because their doctor has seen this 6 times, and how dare you advocate against what they might be telling you in hopes of being seen as a whole human being. Keisha and I share that, like, allopathic medicine has its place, and nowhere in anything that either of us would do would we ever tell somebody to hop off their meds and do this, that, and the third.
Right.
But in the same sentence, we both would encourage you to ask more questions when the side effects list is about 100 times longer than the curative option that you're trying to take. Questions should be asked.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep. Absolutely.
This has been, I love talking to you.
Same.
It's been such a fantastic conversation. I know this isn't the last time we're going to do this.
No.
So you're officially signed up for another episode.
Can't wait.
If you guys have nothing else from this, there are so many different pathways, opportunities that can be taken. And, Keisha's a bridge builder and an empowerer. So she will teach you to build your own bridge at different points and aspects of your life. She's got magical tools and practices to share. So stay tuned for that. And we're human beings too. Let's have conversations. Let's share our experiences. I know I've benefited from hearing some of Keisha's stories, and I hope that you all will when you catch this on the replay. So, leave your comments below. If you're looking for her information, let me know. I'll put it in the description box. And just remember, decolonize. What do we have? We have decolonize. We have what else, Keisha? What else do we have?
So decolonize. Magic is practical and it's everywhere and it's all around us. And then we're all connected to everything and everyone.
Perfect. Yeah. I don't think it needs to be said any other way. Yeah. So for those of you watching, we'll bid you adieu for now, and we'll catch you next time on Divine Dialogue. Keisha, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Bye, everyone, for now.
Bye.